The arrow was already in flight when Arya saw it. She'd spent the last hour pressed against the market square's stone wall, trying to stay out of sight while the Alpha King gave his speech. But her eyes had caught the glint of metal arcing through the autumn air, death whistling at the precise angle that would pierce the king's heart. She didn't think. Thinking was for people who had futures, who had something to lose. Arya had neither. She lunged sideways, arms outstretched, and felt the impact like a fist to her chest. The arrow punched through her sternum with a wet, decisive sound. So this is what dying feels like, she thought distantly. Not the searing agony she'd expected. Just cold. Cold spreading from the wound outward, turning her blood to frost, her bones to brittle ice. The cursed arrow sent tendrils of black magic crawling through her veins like living shadows. She was on the ground. The cobblestones were slick with something dark and wet. Her blood? Hard to tell with her vision graying at the edges. Above her, chaos erupted. Screaming. The sound of guards shouting orders, boots pounding stone. But it all felt far away, like she was hearing it through water. Someone was kneeling beside her. Large hands pressed against her chest. She wanted to laugh at the futility of it, at how he was trying to hold her together when she could feel herself coming apart from the inside. The arrow hadn't just pierced her. Something was spreading from the wound, something that turned her blood to sludge in her veins. A cursed arrow? Of course. Stay with me. The voice was rough, commanding. She'd heard it from a distance all afternoon, the Alpha King addressing his people with that same authoritative tone. Now, up close, he sounded almost desperate. Don't close your eyes. Arya tried to focus on his face. Strong features, sharp jaw, eyes that burned gold even in human form. He looked furious. Kings probably didn't like when random women ruined their speeches by bleeding out on their watch. I don't even know your name, he said, and there was something raw in his voice that didn't make sense. That's the point, she wanted to tell him. Nobody does. Her lips moved, but nothing came out. The cold was in her throat now, climbing higher. She could feel the curse burrowing deeper, wrapping around her heart like a fist slowly clenching shut. The king's face blurred. The shouting faded. Darkness pulled her under. Before we continue, please like this video and subscribe. It will make my day. Now, back to our story. The first thing Arya felt was warmth. Not the cold that had consumed her as she died, and she had died. She was certain of it. She'd felt her heart stutter and stop, felt the curse squeeze the last breath from her lungs. But this was different. This was heat against her skin, like lying in sunlight after a lifetime in shadow. The second thing she felt was pain. It radiated from her chest in dull, persistent waves. Not the white-hot agony of the arrow, but something deeper, bone deep. Like her entire body had been torn apart and stitched back together by someone who wasn't entirely sure how the pieces fit. Arya tried to move and immediately regretted it. Her muscles screamed in protest. Her mouth tasted like copper and ash. Don't. The voice was low, rough with exhaustion. You'll tear the healing. She forced her eyes open. The room swam into focus slowly. High ceilings, stone walls, a massive fireplace crackling with flames that cast dancing shadows across dark wood furniture. Expensive furniture. The kind she'd only ever seen through windows. This wasn't a healer's ward. This was someone's private chamber. And sitting in a chair beside the bed, looking like he hadn't slept in days, was Alpha King Davion Cross. Arya's heart kicked against her ribs. She tried to sit up, failed, and settled for turning her head to look at him properly. He looked worse than she felt, shirt half unbuttoned and stained with what might have been blood, dark circles under his eyes. Hair disheveled like he'd been running his hands through it for hours. You're awake, he said flatly. Not a question. Not even particularly relieved. Just stating a fact. I'm alive, Arya corrected, her voice coming out as a rasp. Her throat felt like she'd swallowed broken glass. For now. Davion leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and fixed her with those unsettling gold eyes. The arrow was cursed. Dark magic. The kind that doesn't let go once it's in you. The healers couldn't remove it without killing you, and leaving it in was killing you slower. Arya processed this. So, what did you do? His jaw tightened. Something I shouldn't have. Before she could ask what that meant, he stood abruptly and moved to a side table where a pitcher of water sat. He poured a glass and brought it to her, his movements stiff, controlled. When he held it to her lips, his hands were steady, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. She drank carefully. The water hurt going down, but God, it was the best thing she'd ever tasted. The curse was tied to your life force, Davion said as he set the glass aside. It was feeding on you, using your energy to sustain itself. The healers said the only way to fight it was to give you more life force than it could consume, to flood your system with enough power that it would burn the curse out. Understanding dawned slowly, horribly. You bonded with me? I marked you, he corrected, his voice careful. It's not a full bond, not like true mates, but it created a connection strong enough to share my life force with you, strong enough to keep you alive while your body fought off the curse. Arya's hand moved instinctively to her neck. Her fingers found raised skin, a bite mark, still tender, that sent a shiver down her spine when she touched it. The mark of an alpha. The mark that meant she belonged to him, in the eyes of every shifter who saw it. You should have let me die, she said, quietly. Davion's head snapped toward her, something dangerous flashing in his eyes. You threw yourself in front of a cursed arrow meant for me. I wasn't going to let you die for that. I'm nobody, Arya said, and it wasn't self-pity, just fact. She'd learned a long time ago that facts were easier to swallow than hopes. This is a bad trade for you. That's not your decision to make. The sharp edge in his voice surprised her. She looked at him more carefully. He was furious, she realized. Not at her exactly, but at something. At the situation. At the choice he'd been forced to make. How long was I unconscious? She asked. 3 days. 3 days of her lying here in his bed, and it was his bed. She was certain now, taking in the masculine furnishings, the weapons mounted on the walls, the faint scent of cedar and smoke that clung to the sheets. 3 days of him keeping vigil while the court probably lost their minds over what he'd done. They know, don't they? Arya said. About the mark. Everyone knows? Davion moved back to his chair, running a hand through his already disheveled hair. You've been the primary topic of conversation in court for 3 days. The wolfless woman who saved the king's life. The nobody he marked. The way he said nobody stung more than the wound in her chest. Not because he was cruel about it, his tone was perfectly neutral, but because it was true, and hearing it from his mouth made it feel more real somehow. I should leave, Arya said. As soon as I can walk, I'll go. You can't. Davion cut her off. The mark creates a bond. Incomplete, artificial, but functional. Separation will be painful for both of us until the curse fully leaves your system. And according to the healers, that could take weeks, maybe months. Arya stared at him. You're saying I'm stuck here? I'm saying we're stuck with each other. He met her eyes, and for the first time she saw the exhaustion there, the weight of it. I'm not happy about this either, but we don't have a choice. The words shouldn't have hurt. They were practical, honest. But something in Arya's chest twisted anyway. Some stupid, childish part of her that had dared to hope, for just a moment, that being marked by a king might mean something other than obligation and regret. She was an idiot. I'm sorry, she said quietly, looking away from him, for putting you in this position. I wasn't thinking. I saw the arrow, and I moved. Why? The question caught her off guard. What? Why did you move? Davion leaned forward again, studying her face with an intensity that made her want to squirm. You don't know me. I've done nothing for you. You're not Pack. You're not bound to me by loyalty or law. So why risk your life for a king you've never met? Arya opened her mouth, then closed it. How could she explain that she'd spent her entire life watching people matter, watching them be important and valued and seen, while she existed in the margins? How could she tell him that in that split second she'd made a calculation? His life was worth something, and hers wasn't. And at least her death might mean something if it saved someone who actually mattered. I don't know, she lied. Instinct, I guess. Davion's eyes narrowed slightly. He didn't believe her. She could see it in the way his jaw tightened, but he didn't push. Instead, he stood again, this time moving toward the door. I'll have food sent up. You need to eat, rebuild your strength. A healer will check on you this evening. He paused with his hand on the door handle. There are clothes in the wardrobe. You'll stay here until you're well enough to move to your own quarters. Your own quarters, not guest quarters, or rooms in the servants' wing. She was being given status then, position. Because he'd marked her, and now she couldn't be invisible anymore even if she wanted to be. The thought made her chest tight. Thank you, Arya said, because she didn't know what else to say. Your Majesty. Something flickered across his face, irritation maybe, or discomfort. Davion, if you're wearing my mark, you can use my name. Then he was gone, the door closing behind him with a soft click that felt far too final. Arya lay back against the silk pillows and stared at the canopy above the bed. Her whole body ached. The mark on her neck throbbed in time with her heartbeat. And somewhere in the back of her mind, she could feel something else. Something new, strange, and unwelcome. Him. Not his thoughts, exactly, but his presence. Like a second heartbeat layered beneath her own. She could sense his exhaustion, his frustration, the tight control he kept on emotions she couldn't quite name. The bond. This was what he'd meant by connection. Arya closed her eyes and tried not to think about how badly she'd just complicated both their lives. Tried not to remember the feel of his hands pressing against her wound, trying to hold her together. Tried not to wonder why a king would spend 3 days keeping vigil over a woman who was, by all accounts, nobody worth saving. She'd spent 26 years being invisible. Being the girl in the background, the one people's eyes skipped over. Her parents had died when she was 8, a border raid, quick and brutal, and she'd been shuffled through distant relatives who saw her as an obligation they couldn't shirk. When she never shifted, when it became clear she'd never have a wolf, those relatives had made it clear she was on her own. She'd learned young that people didn't invest in things that wouldn't pay returns. She'd learned not to want, not to hope, not to expect anything beyond what she could provide for herself. And now she was marked by a king, lying in his bed, bound to him by magic neither of them wanted. It felt like the cruelest joke the universe had ever played. The food arrived an hour later, brought by a servant who wouldn't meet Arya's eyes. She ate mechanically, roasted, chicken, fresh bread, fruit she couldn't name, tasting nothing. Her body needed fuel. That was all this was. The healer came at dusk, an elderly woman with sharp eyes and gentle hands who examined the wound in Arya's chest and the mark on her neck with equal clinical precision. The arrow wound is healing well, she announced. No infection, no residual curse magic in the tissue. Whatever the king did, it worked. She prodded the mark, making Arya wince. This, however, will take time. The bond he created isn't natural. It's forced. Your body is trying to accept it and reject it simultaneously. You'll feel discomfort, phantom pains, emotional bleed-through from His Majesty. I can already feel him, Arya admitted quietly. Is that normal? For a bond this strong? Yes. The healer sat back, studying her. You're lucky to be alive. Cursed arrows like that don't usually leave survivors. I know. Do you? The woman's gaze sharpened. Do you understand what you've become? What it means to wear a king's mark? Arya's hand moved to her neck instinctively. It's not like that. It was a tactical decision. He said so himself. The healer made a non-committal sound. Tactical or not, the mark is real. And in our world, marks have meaning. Whether His Majesty likes it or not, You're bound to him now. People will treat you differently, expect things from you, judge you. They already judged me, Arya said quietly, for being wolfless, for being nobody. At least now they have a reason. The healer's expression softened slightly. You're not nobody anymore, child. For better or worse. She stood, gathering her supplies. Rest. Take the pain medication I'm leaving on the table. And try not to fight the bond too hard. Resistance only makes the pain worse. After she left, Arya lay in the darkness and felt the truth of those words. She could sense Davion somewhere in the castle. Not his location exactly, but his presence, like a compass needle always pointing north. She could feel his tension, the tight control he kept on himself, the weight of responsibility that never lifted. She wondered if he could feel her too, feel her confusion, her fear, the strange hollow ache that came from suddenly being visible after a lifetime in shadow. She wondered if he regretted saving her. The thought shouldn't have hurt as much as it did. By the second day, Arya could stand without her legs shaking. By the third, she could walk across the room without feeling like she was going to collapse. The wound in her chest had faded to a dull ache, and the mark on her neck had stopped throbbing constantly, settling into a strange warmth that she was learning to ignore. Davion visited twice a day, morning and evening, like clockwork. He never stayed long, just checked that she had everything she needed, that the healers were satisfied with her progress. His manner was perfectly polite, perfectly distant, like she was a responsibility he was managing. Nothing more. It shouldn't have bothered her. She was an obligation, a complication he'd been forced to accept. The fact that he was courteous about it was more than she had any right to ask for. But the bond made it harder to maintain that distance. Every time he entered the room, she felt his presence like a physical touch. And worse, she could sense the things he was trying to hide, the concern beneath the cool exterior, the guilt he wouldn't voice, the weight of his crown. On the fourth day, he found her standing by the window, looking out over the castle grounds. She'd finally put on the clothes he'd mentioned, a shirt that hung to her knees and pants she'd had to tie with a belt to keep from falling off. She felt ridiculous, but it was better than wearing the blood-stained remains of what she'd died in. "You're up," Davion said from the doorway. Arya turned. He looked better than he had that first day, cleaner at least, like he'd finally slept. But the tension in his shoulders was still there, the careful control that never slipped. "I'm sick of lying down," she said. "And the healer said movement would help." He nodded, moving into the room. "How's the pain?" "Manageable." Arya turned back to the window. "When can I leave?" She felt his surprise through the bond, before he masked it. "Leave? These chambers. I assume I'm not supposed to live in your bedroom permanently." "Right." There was something strange in his voice. "I've had rooms prepared for you in the East Wing. You can move whenever you're ready." "I'm ready now. The healer cleared me for light activity." Arya kept her gaze on the gardens below. "And honestly, I'd rather not spend another night in your bed while you sleep in a chair in your own room." Silence. Then, "You knew about that?" "The servants talk. They think I'm asleep, but I hear them." She finally looked at him. "You don't have to do that. I'm fine. The bond doesn't require us to be in the same room." "No, but separation will be uncomfortable until it stabilizes." His jaw tightened. "I was trying to make it easier." "You were trying to be mobile." The words came out sharper than she intended. "But we both know this isn't a real bond, Davion. You don't have to pretend it is." Something flashed in his eyes, anger maybe, or frustration. The bond crackled between them, and for a moment she felt the full force of his emotions, the guilt, the resentment, the irritation, and underneath it all, something that felt uncomfortably like hurt. "You're right," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "It's not a real bond. I'll have your things moved to the East Wing today." He left before she could respond. Arya stood by the window and hated herself a little. He'd been trying to help, in his own stiff, duty-bound way, and she'd thrown it back in his face. Through the bond, she felt him moving through the castle, felt the moment his anger shifted to resignation. Then to that bone-deep exhaustion she was becoming familiar with, she wondered if this was how it would be between them. Forever careful, forever distant, bound together but never truly connected. It felt like another kind of death, slower but no less final than the arrow. The rooms in the East Wing were beautiful, spacious, well-appointed, with a view of the mountains that took her breath away. They were also clearly meant for someone important, a high-ranking courtier, maybe, or a visiting dignitary, not for a wolfless nobody who'd stumbled into the king's life by accident. Arya stood in the center of the main room and felt the weight of it all pressing down on her. The servants who'd moved her things had been polite but distant, their eyes skipping over her the way people's eyes always had. But now there was something else there too. Judgment. Speculation. Wondering what a woman like her was doing with the king's mark on her neck. She touched it without thinking. Felt the raised skin, the permanent reminder of what had happened. The door opened without warning. Arya spun around, heart jumping, and found herself facing a woman in elegant court dress. She was beautiful in that effortless way some people were. Dark hair, radiant features, the kind of confidence that came from always being wanted. "So, you're the one," the woman said, looking Arya up and down with assessment. The woman who saved the king's life. Arya's shoulders went back instinctively. "I didn't do it for recognition." "No?" The woman smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Then why did you do it?" "Does it matter?" "It does if you're wearing his mark." The woman moved closer, and Arya caught the scent of expensive perfume. "I'm Selene Ashford, the king's cousin, which makes me one of the few people in this castle who can speak plainly with you." "Then speak plainly." Selene's smile widened. "You're causing problems. The court is in an uproar. Davian marked a wolfless woman, a nobody from the streets, and now everyone's wondering what it means. Are you his mistress? His pet project? A political maneuver?" Each word landed like a blow, but Arya kept her face neutral. She'd long learned how to take insults without flinching. "I'm none of those things." "Then what are you?" "Someone who made a split decision and is living with the consequences." Arya met Selene's eyes directly. "If you're here to warn me away from him, save your breath. There's nothing between us. The bond is artificial. It'll fade." "Will it?" Selene tilted her head. "Bonds are tricky things. Even artificial ones can become real if you're not careful." "That won't happen." Arya's voice was flat. "Your cousin made it clear this is an obligation, not a choice, and I have no intention of making his life more complicated than I already have." Something shifted in Selene's expression, not quite approval, but close. "You're smarter than you look." "Most people are." Selene laughed at that, genuine amusement lighting her face. "All right, maybe you'll survive court after all." She moved toward the door, then paused. "A word of advice, though. Davian doesn't do anything without reason. If he marked you, saved you, it wasn't just tactical. He could have let you die and mourned appropriately. The fact that he didn't means something, whether he admits it or not. Or it means he's too noble for his own good. Maybe." Selene's smile turned knowing. "But I've known him his entire life, and I've never seen him lose sleep over anyone. He's been at your bedside for days. That's not duty. That's something else." She left before Arya could respond. Arya stood alone in her beautiful new room and tried to ignore the way her heart had started beating faster. Tried to tell herself that Selene was wrong, that Davian's actions were exactly what they seemed. Obligation and guilt. Nothing more. But through the bond, she could feel him. And despite everything, despite knowing better, despite 26 years of learning not to want things she couldn't have, Arya found herself wondering what it would be like if Selene was right. If the bond could become something real. If she could be something other than an obligation to be managed. The thought terrified her more than the arrow had. The first assassination attempt came 6 days after Arya moved to the East Wing. She was walking through the gardens, trying to get used to being outside, being seen, when she felt it. Not a sound, not a sight, but a wrongness that crawled up her spine and made every instinct she had scream danger. Her head snapped toward the king's guard training in the courtyard beyond the garden wall. Davion was there. She could feel him through the bond, sparring with his soldiers, teaching them probably the way good commanders did. And someone in the crowd watching wasn't watching like the others. Arya was running before her conscious mind caught up, shoving through the garden gate, pushing past startled courtiers. The wrongness grew stronger with each step, and then she saw it. A man in servant's clothes, his hand moving toward something at his belt, his eyes fixed on Davion's unprotected back with an intensity that was all wrong. Poison! The word tore from her throat. The wine! Don't drink the wine! Every head turned toward her, including Davion's, and in that split second of distraction, she saw the servant's hand freeze, saw a calculation flash across his face, saw him drop whatever he'd been reaching for, and bolt. Davion's guards reacted instantly, tackling the man before he'd made it 10 feet. The wine cup he'd been approaching, the one that had been sitting innocuously on a table at the courtyard's edge, was immediately seized. Arya stood there breathing hard, her chest aching where the arrow wound was still healing, and felt every eye in the courtyard on her. Again. Davion crossed to her quickly. His hand went to her elbow, steadying, possessive, and she felt the spike of adrenaline through the bond. How did you know? His voice was low, meant only for her. I felt it. Arya pressed a hand to her chest, trying to calm her racing heart. Something was wrong. I don't know how to explain it. His eyes narrowed. The bond. She looked toward the captured servant who was now being hauled away by 4 guards. I just knew someone meant you harm. Davion's jaw tightened. He turned to his captain, a grizzled wolf named Corin, with scars that told stories. Test the wine, and find out who that man is, who hired him, and how he got close enough to poison my drink. Yes, Your Majesty. Corin's eyes flicked to Arya. My lady. Arya opened her mouth to correct him. She wasn't a lady, wasn't anything, but Davion's hand on her elbow tightened slightly. He led her away from the courtyard, through corridors she was still learning, into a small study she'd never seen before. The moment the door closed behind them, he rounded on her. That was reckless. Arya blinked. I'm sorry, I should have let you drink poison? You should have alerted the guards. You should have stayed at a safe distance. His voice was sharp with something that felt like anger and tasted like fear through the bond. You're still healing. If there had been more than one assassin, if they'd targeted you instead, why would they target me? I'm nobody. You're wearing my mark. The words came out rougher than he probably intended. Davion turned away, running a hand through his hair in a gesture she was learning meant he was trying to regain control. That makes you a target. Don't you understand that? Everyone who wants to hurt me now has a convenient weakness to exploit. The word weakness landed like a physical blow. Arya's spine straightened. Then remove the mark. Break the bond. I'll leave. The curse is mostly gone. The healers said so yesterday. She kept her voice level, fighting to hide the hurt beneath the logic. We both know the bond can be broken now if you want it gone. So, if I'm a liability, I didn't say that. You just called me a weakness. Davion turned back to her, and the look on his face was complicated in ways she couldn't parse. That's not... He stopped, trying to choose his words carefully. Having someone you care about is always a weakness. It gives your enemies leverage. You don't care about me, Arya said simply. You feel responsible for me. There's a difference. Something flashed in his eyes. Is there? The wine was poisoned. Corin's voice came from the doorway. Neither of them had heard him knock. Knightsbane would have killed His Majesty within the hour. The servant broke under questioning. He was hired by someone in the Southern Territories. Someone who wants the throne destabilized. Davion's expression went cold. Get me a name. Working on it, Your Majesty. Corin hesitated. The man also mentioned there are others. This wasn't an isolated attempt. Davion's voice was grim. Thank you, Corin. Keep me informed. After the captain left, silence settled over the room again. Arya studied Davion's profile, the sharp line of his jaw, the the tension in his shoulders that never seemed to ease. "You're tired," she said quietly. "I'm fine. I can feel you through the bond, remember? You're exhausted. When's the last time you actually slept? For more than 3 hours at a time?" His silence was answer enough. Arya moved closer before she could second-guess herself. "You saved my life. Let me do something for yours. Go to bed. I'll stay until you fall asleep." "Why?" "Because the bond makes separation uncomfortable, and you need rest. And I'm—" She caught herself before saying useful for something. "I'm offering. Take it or don't." For a long moment, she thought he'd refuse. Then something in him seemed to give way. "All right, but in my chambers, not yours. The bond is stronger there." His chambers. Where she'd spent 3 days unconscious, where she'd woken up wearing his mark. Going back felt dangerous in ways she couldn't articulate, but she followed him anyway. The room looked different in daylight, less intimidating somehow. Davion moved to the bed, that massive bed she'd occupied alone, and sat on the edge, pulling off his boots with mechanical efficiency. "You don't have to stay," he said, not looking at her. "If this is uncomfortable." Arya settled into the chair he'd spent 3 nights sleeping in. "Just rest. I'll be here." He lay back against the pillows, still fully dressed except for the boots, and closed his eyes. Through the bond, she felt his exhaustion like a physical weight, pressing down on him, pulling him under. But she also felt his resistance, the part of him that didn't know how to let go, to be vulnerable, to trust that someone else would keep watch. "Tell me something," he said after a moment, eyes still closed. "Like what?" "Something about you that isn't in the reports my spy master compiled." "You had reports compiled on me? You saved my life, and I marked you. Of course I had reports compiled." He cracked one eye open. "They were disappointingly sparse. No living family, no permanent residence, away in Noah's different jobs over the past 5 years, none lasting more than a few months. It's like you were trying to stay invisible." "I was." Arya pulled her knees up to her chest. "When you're wolfless, visibility is dangerous. People notice you don't shift. They start asking questions, wondering what's wrong with you. It's easier to keep moving, keep your head down, be forgettable. You're not forgettable." The words were quiet, almost too quiet to hear. Arya's heart did something complicated in her chest. "I used to be," she said. "Before this, before you. I was very good at being nobody." "Why?" The question was simple, but the answer wasn't. Arya looked at her hands. "My parents died when I was 8. I barely remember them now, just impressions. My mother's laugh, the way my father's hands were always warm." She swallowed. "I was supposed to shift for the first time that year. Everyone said it would happen any day. But then they died, and I went to live with my aunt, and the shift never came." Through the bond, she felt Davion's attention sharpening, even though his eyes remained closed. "My aunt tried, at first. She really did. But I was another mouth to feed, and when it became clear, I'd never have a wolf, never be pack." Arya shrugged. "She stopped trying as hard, passed me to her sister, who passed me to a cousin who eventually just gave me enough coin for a month's rent and told me I was old enough to figure things out myself. I was 14. 14. Davion's voice was rough. "I managed. Took whatever work I could find. Learned to be useful without being noticed. Learned that wanting things, wanting to belong, wanting to matter, just made it hurt more when you didn't." She forced herself to keep her voice level. "So I stopped wanting, and it was fine, until I saw that arrow." Arya looked at him finally. His eyes were open now, fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "And I thought, if I'm going to die anyway, if my life doesn't mean anything, at least it could mean something in the end. At least someone might remember that I existed." Davion sat up slowly. "Arya, I'm not looking for pity. She cut him off, her voice sharper than she intended. I'm just answering your question. You asked why I did it. That's why. Not because I'm brave or noble, because I'm nobody, and saving a king seemed like the best use of a worthless life. The silence that followed felt heavy enough to crush her. Then Davion was moving, crossing the space between them, pulling her up from the chair. His hands framed her face, gentle, despite their size, despite the violence she knew they were capable of. Your life is not worthless, he said, and there was something almost fierce in his voice. Do you understand me? It never was. Not before. Not now. The fact that you believe it breaks something in me. Arya couldn't breathe. She could only stare up at him and feel the truth of his words echoing through the bond, the genuine anger at what she'd said, the protectiveness she didn't deserve, the care she didn't know how to accept. Why? The word came out broken. Why do you care? You don't know me. The bond is artificial. I'm just... His thumbs traced her cheekbones. You sensed danger no one else could. You're sharp and observant, and you notice things people miss because you've spent your whole life watching from the sidelines. His voice dropped. And maybe the bond started artificial, but it's not anymore. Not for me. Arya's heart stopped. What? I can feel you, Davion said quietly. Your emotions, your pain, your thoughts sometimes when they're strong enough. And you're not an obligation, Arya. You're not a weakness or a complication or any of the other things you think you are. Then what am I? He leaned closer, his forehead nearly touching hers. I don't know yet, but I want to find out. If you'll let me. Every instinct Arya had screamed at her to pull away, to protect herself, to not want this, because wanting led to disappointment and disappointment led to pain. She'd learned that lesson young and learned it well, but Davion was looking at her like she mattered, like she was worth knowing, worth keeping. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. Neither do I. His lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. We'll figure it out together. Then he was kissing her. It wasn't like the kisses in stories, overwhelming and perfect and solving everything. It was tentative, almost questioning, like he was giving her space to pull away if she wanted. His lips were warm against hers, his hands still gentle on her face, and through the bond, she felt everything he was trying not to say. The want, yes, but also the fear, the uncertainty, the strange, terrifying hope that maybe this could be something real. Arya kissed him back, rising up on her toes, her hands finding his shoulders to steady herself. The bond sang between them, not the dull ache of forced connection, but something brighter, sharper, more alive. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Davion rested his forehead against hers. This complicates things, he said. He pulled back slightly, studying her face. Stay with me tonight, not because the bond requires it, but because I want you to. Arya should have said no, should have maintained the distance that kept her safe. But she found herself nodding instead, letting him pull her toward the bed, curling up beside him when he lay back down. His arm wrapped around her waist, solid and warm, and through the bond she felt his exhaustion finally winning over his control. He fell asleep within minutes, his breathing evening out, but his grip on her never loosening. Arya lay awake longer, staring at the canopy above them, trying to process what had just happened, trying to understand how she'd gone from dying in the street to being held by a king. It should have terrified her. But more than that, it felt like coming home. She woke to shouting. Not in the room, somewhere distant, but close enough to hear. Davion was already awake, already moving, his body going from relaxed to combat-ready in seconds. Stay here, he ordered, reaching for the sword that hung by the bed. Arya was on her feet, ignoring the protest of her still-healing chest. Through the bond, she felt his spike of alarm, the danger that had him reaching for weapons. They burst into the corridor together and found chaos. Guards running, servants pressed against walls, and at the end of the hallway, near the entrance to the east wing, smoke. Fire, the acrid smell of burning wood and something else, something chemical. The east wing, Arya breathed. her rooms. If she'd been sleeping there instead of with Davion, another assassination attempt. Davion's voice was cold with fury. They're getting bolder. Corin appeared through the smoke, his face grim. Your Majesty, they set fire to Lady Arya's chambers. If she'd been inside, she wasn't. Davion's hand found Arya's, squeezed hard. Because she was with me. Understanding flickered across Corin's face. I see. Then the assassins failed again. Not for long. Davion's eyes glowed gold, his wolf rising to the surface. Find them. I want everyone who had access to that wing questioned. I want to know who's coordinating these attacks, and I want it done before sunset. Yes, Your Majesty. As Corin strode away, barking orders to his guards, Davion turned to Arya. The fury in his eyes was tempered by something else, relief maybe, or fear at how close she'd come to dying. You're staying in my chambers from now on, he said. Not a request. Davion, I can't protect you if you're on the other side of the castle. And before you argue that you don't need protection, remember that someone just tried to burn you alive in your sleep. This is my fault, she said quietly. If I hadn't saved you that day, then I'd be dead, and these assassins would be targeting someone else. Davion pulled her closer, his thumb brushing over the mark on her neck. This isn't your fault. This is the reality of being connected to someone in power. People will try to use you to hurt me, but they're going to fail because I'm not going to let them anywhere near you. The possessiveness in his voice made something warm unfold in her chest. I can help, she said. I sensed the poison before anyone else did. Maybe I can sense other threats too. Maybe the bond is the only reason you're alive right now. His hands framed her face again, thumb tracing her cheekbone. You have good instincts. I'm not denying that. But I need you to promise me you won't take unnecessary risks, no more running toward danger to protect me. You literally tore apart your life to save mine. That's different. How? Because, he stopped, jaw tightening. Because I'm expendable. Kings die all the time. There's a line of succession, protocols in place. But you, if something happens to you... He didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. Arya felt it through the bond, the fear that was worse than any he'd felt for himself, the desperate need to keep her safe that went beyond logic or duty. I matter to you, she said softly. You matter to me. His forehead pressed against hers. More than I expected. More than I know what to do with. Arya closed her eyes, letting herself lean into him, letting herself believe for just a moment that this could last. That she could be someone worth protecting, worth keeping, worth loving? The thought was too big, too dangerous. She pushed it away. We should talk about what this means, she said. Later. Davion pulled back, his expression shifting into something more controlled. Right now I need to handle this, find out who's trying to kill us both. But tonight, his eyes softened. Tonight we'll talk. Figure out what happens. Next. He kissed her forehead, gentle and quick, then strode away to deal with the aftermath of another attempt on their lives. Arya stood in the smoky corridor and touched the mark on her neck, feeling it pulse with warmth, with connection, with something that felt dangerously close to belonging. By sunset, 3 more conspirators had been found and questioned. All of them pointed to the same source. Lord Breslin, a northern noble who'd been quietly building support for a coup, who saw Davion's sudden bond with a wolfless woman as weakness. Proof that the king was vulnerable, distracted, no longer fit to rule. They're wrong, Corin told Davion's son as they stood in the war room, maps spread across the table. Arya sat in the corner, observing. You're more focused than I've seen you in years, since you marked her. Davion's eyes flicked to Arya, something warm passing through the bond. She's a good influence. She's a target, Corin corrected, not unkindly. Breslin won't stop with fire. He'll keep coming until either you're dead or she is. Then we end him first. Davion's voice went cold. Gather the evidence. I want charges drawn up by morning. Treason, attempted assassination, conspiracy to destabilize the throne. And Corin, make it public. Let everyone see what happens to those who threaten what's mine. The possessiveness in those last words sent heat through Arya's body. She shifted in her chair, and Davion's attention snapped to her immediately, reading her discomfort through the bond. "Leave us," he told Corin. When they were alone, he crossed to where she sat. "What's wrong?" "Nothing, Arya struggled to find words. "This is a lot. People are trying to kill us. You're preparing to execute a lord. And everyone keeps calling me yours like I'm property." "You're not property." Davion crouched in front of her chair, bringing them eye level. "But you are mine, just like I'm yours. That's how this works." "I don't know how this works." The words burst out before she could stop them. "I don't know how to be with someone. How to be important to someone. Every time you look at me like I matter, I keep waiting for it to be a trick. For you to realize I'm still just nobody." "Arya, I'm serious." She forced herself to meet his eyes. "I've spent my entire life being forgettable, being passed around like an obligation no one wanted. And now you're looking at me like I'm worth protecting, worth keeping, and I don't know how to trust that. Because people don't keep me, Davion. They never have." His hands found hers, lacing their fingers together. "I'm not like them. I'm not letting you go. You say that now. I'll say it tomorrow too, and the day after that, and every day until you believe it." His grip tightened. "You saved my life. Not because you wanted something from me, not because you thought I'd reward you, but because you saw someone in danger, and your instinct was to help, even though it cost you everything." He leaned closer. "That's not nobody, Arya. That's someone extraordinary, and I'm not giving you up, no matter how many assassins come." Tears burned behind her eyes. "You make it sound so simple." "It is simple. I want you. You want me. Don't deny it. I can feel it through the bond. Everything else is just noise we have to deal with." His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "Stay with me. Not because the bond requires it. Stay because you choose to." Arya looked at him, this king who'd saved her life, who'd marked her, who'd somehow become the first person in 26 years to make her feel like she belonged somewhere. "I'm scared," she admitted. "So am I." His smile was crooked. "Terrified, actually. I've never felt this way about anyone. It's new. It's uncomfortable. But I'm not running from it. Even though I'm wolfless? Even though I'm... Especially because of who you are." He pulled her forward until their foreheads touched. "You're brave enough to run toward danger when everyone else runs away. When you look at me, you don't see a king. You see me." "I do see you," Arya whispered. "Maybe too clearly. Good. Because I see you too. And I like what I see." This time when he kissed her, there was no hesitation. No question. Just certainty. Solid and real, and terrifying in its intensity. Arya kissed him back, pouring everything she couldn't say into it. All her fear, and hope, and desperate, fragile want. When they broke apart, Davion stood and pulled her up with him. "Come to bed," he said. "Real bed this time. Not because you're keeping watch or I need sleep. Because I want to hold you while I can." "While you can?" "Tomorrow, I'm going after Breslin. Taking half the guard north to end this before more attempts are made." His jaw tightened. "You'll stay here, under Corin's protection. I'm coming with you." "Absolutely not. You just said I see things others miss." Arya stepped closer, not backing down. "You said my instincts saved your life, so let me help. Let me be useful for something other than being a target." "It's too dangerous." "So is staying here alone. At least if I'm with you, we can protect each other." Davion opened his mouth to argue, then stopped. Through the bond, she felt his resistance warring with logic. She pressed her advantage. "You know I'm right. The bond makes separation painful. You said so yourself. And if Breslin has more assassins here, Leaving me behind makes me vulnerable. I hate that you're making sense. But his expression was softening. Fine. But you stay close to me. No running off to save anyone. No heroics. Arya smiled despite everything. You're very demanding. You're very stubborn. He pulled her closer, his hands sliding to her waist. We're going to fight about this constantly, aren't we? Probably. Good. I like a challenge. He kissed her again, softer this time. Sweeter. Come on, let's get a few hours of sleep before we ride out at dawn. They made their way to his chambers, their chambers. She changed into one of his shirts while he stripped to his undershorts, and they climbed into bed together like it was something they'd done 100 times instead of just once. Davian pulled her against his chest, her head tucked under his chin, his arm heavy across her waist. Through the bond, she felt his exhaustion mixing with contentment, his worry for tomorrow tempered by something warmer. I'm glad you saved my life, he murmured into her hair. Me too. Arya let herself relax into him, let herself believe, just for tonight, that maybe this could work, that maybe she'd finally found somewhere she belonged. Even though you're bossy and overprotective and terrible at sleeping. His chest rumbled with quiet laughter. You like that I'm overprotective. I'm tolerating it. You're enjoying it. Being protected now felt good when she'd spent so long protecting herself. Go to sleep, she said instead of admitting anything. We have assassins to deal with tomorrow. As long as you're beside me, I'm not worried. The words settled over her like a blanket, warm and solid and impossible to ignore. Arya closed her eyes and let herself drift, feeling Davian's heartbeat steady beneath her palm, feeling the bond hum between them with something that felt less like magic and more like choice. Tomorrow they'd face whoever wanted them dead. Tomorrow